to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the second story in the 6th season of the revived era of Doctor Who, The Curse of the Black Spot, written by Steve Thompson and is directed by Jeremy Webb. We'll also be tackling, very likely, the prequel episode that aired on the internet a few days prior to the actual story. This is the first Doctor Who story written by Steve Thompson and the first story on television to be directed by Jeremy Webb. Webb had also directed a short episode called Death Comes to Time, but I will be tackling that after this story. So there's that. The prequel was also written by Steve Thompson, and this story is kind of interesting because it's inspired by the hit film series Pirates of the Caribbean, with its pirate setting and its swashbuckling adventure. With the title itself, Curse of the Black Spot, is actually a reference to the first film, which was called Curse of the Black Pearl. This story, fun fact, was originally supposed to be the 10th or the 11th episode. However, Stephen Moffat, before the series aired, wanted it all juggled up. So this story then became the 3rd episode, the second story, because the first 2 episodes were a 2-parter of the series. So this was actually supposed to take place in the later half of the series. However, due to things being juggled around, because from what I can remember, Stephen Moffat wanted it to be a balance of darker and lighter stories, and he felt there were too many dark stories in the first half, so he swapped it around so that we have a much more lighter adventure in this first half, because series 6 is split into 2 halves, if you didn't know. Also, as well, this story introduces the character of Henry Avery, who might not actually be hugely important to the revived era of the series, or most eras of the series, but in terms of the wider, larger canon of Doctor Who, he was actually mentioned before. He was mentioned all the way back during the first Doctor era in the story The Smugglers, his second to last story. And that is just mental that this story connects to The Smugglers, probably one of the weakest of the first Doctor era in my opinion. But it's a strange connection. How this came to be, Steve Thompson had no actual, he didn't actually know anything about the Doctor Who story, The Smugglers. He found a book that his son owned, and he was looking for pirate names who had gone missing, and he found Captain Avery in the list, and so he decided to use the name, not realising that it had been used as a name for a character who had previously been in a pirate-themed episode all the way back in the 1960s, who also left. So this is kind of a prequel to The Smugglers, which is really strange to think. Yeah, it's a prequel to a story during the 1960s. How weird is this show sometimes? In terms of the larger opinion of this story, the mainstream opinion, it's regarded by some as the majority of people as a fun, light-hearted adventure with nothing really too deep or anything too noteworthy in the actual story itself. And a lot of people just I enjoyed it, on to the next episode. But there are a group of people who justifiably don't like this episode, feel like it has a lot of plot holes, with the emotional beats not hitting as they should, and really messing up the landing of the script and messing up the landing of what the story's trying to tell. But is it any good? Well, in the prequel episode, again, the prequels in Series 6 aren't that interesting. I'm still glad that we got them, and I'd rather take these prequels over no prequels any day. But the prequel for this story is just Captain Avery in his boat, monologuing to himself whilst he's writing down in his diary, basically stating that him and his crew have been trapped on his boat for weeks now. There's not been a gust of wind in sight, and something is picking off his men, and he feels like they won't last very long. This is very similar to the Impossible Astronauts prequel, in which we have a new character which was introduced in the story. In that story, it's President Nixon, and here it's Captain Avery sitting in a room, mainly monologuing, mainly just talking, seemingly in a room by themselves, mainly. So it's the prequel itself isn't that interesting, but it still helps feel like a little bit of teaser for the actual story, like a little teaser trailer before you get the main trailer of the story. So in the actual episodes itself, we see that a pirate crew have come back. They're going back to the main ship, and they learn that one of the crew members has actually has marked himself for death. We don't actually at this point know how, but he seemed to have injured himself, and he has gained a black inky spot on his hand that he can't get off, as if like it's part of his skin. And the captain seemingly has no choice but to let this individual go up to the roof of the ship, whilst all of our crew hide out in the captain's office, where we hear some screams and they go up to investigate, only to disappear. However, they hear a knock in their cargo bay, so they all go and investigate, as this is something strange and odd, only to arrive the Doctor, Amy, and Rory to suddenly sprout out and appear into the story. So the captain is very interested on why and knowing how the Doctor, Amy, and Rory got onto his ship. The Doctor explains that basically he picked up his distress call. Essentially, the TARDIS realised that this ship was under stress in some way, was in danger, and so his ship automatically located itself within Captain Avery's ship, which I can't remember what the ship was called. And essentially, they're pirates. They go for gold, and they want gold and treasure, and they work outside against the law. And we get then a scene in which they put the Doctor over the plank, and they start laughing like pirates. Amy at one point dresses up like a pirate, and taking the full advantage of just the idea of being in a pirate ship. She gets a sword and a pirate hat, and she starts a swashbuckling adventure with threatening all the crew. However, Captain Avery points out that this is extremely dangerous. You could essentially kill them all, and has no idea what she's capable of. So there's this little action scene that breaks out before one of the characters, a red shirt. Red shirt, for those of you who don't know, is a sci-fi term meaning a character who's only really introduced to get killed off much early in the story to heighten the tension. So this Red Hood gets injured, but also Rory as well, as a character grabs Amy and the sword flies out of her hand and cuts Rory's hand, and he develops the black spot as well. And this character who also develops the black spot tells Amy that that she has killed him, and she's like, "What? No, I haven't. It's only a scratch. What kind of dumb pirates are you?" And then they kind of learn about this curse, this villainous creature that is coming out to come after them. And then this is where we get introduced to the Siren, this ghost-like spirit entity that comes onto the ship and sings. And when it sings, anybody with the black spot seems to act really strange and odd, as if they're drunk. And they seem to be absolutely fascinated by the Siren, to the point where they just want to grab her hand. And when they grab her hand, they seem to evaporate, disappear into thin air, seemingly killed. And that really heightens the tension when the red shirt gets killed, and Rory, who's under this drunk influence, is about to also get taken. And so our characters have to drag Rory away, as well as work out with the crew what's going on, help them out, and the Doctor also learning, gaining a bond with Captain Henry Avery, and find out what his deal is. Why did he become a pirate? And right off the bat, what this story doesn't do very well, which is Stephen Thompson's weak point in this adventure, is character. None of the characters in this story are interesting. Not even, and I hate to say this, not even the Doctor himself. The Doctor himself here is only really there to give off sci-fi-like explanations to things. Sure, you can have a character who's quirky and just enjoys being around the place like the Doctor does, especially the 11th Doctor, harkening back to incarnations like the second and the fourth incarnation, and would be seen again in the 13th incarnation. However, you do run the risk of this kind of problem where the protagonist doesn't really take the situation that seriously, and the quirky Doctor in this aspect actually hurts this story. Amy and Rory are a no presence. Their characters here are mainly used for could be saved with the joke of Rory saying to Amy that she is the most beautiful girl, talking about the Siren under that drunk influence, and Amy kind of having this almost cheeky jealousy, and Rory being kind of ashamed by the fact that he said something like that, which, considering what Amy has done to Rory, I think is completely fair on Rory's behalf, that he would call anyone beautiful, but and it makes Amy kind of feel unlikable in the sense that she can snog the Doctor and seemingly want him sexually in front of her own husband, and Rory is assumed to just take it well. But really in this story, nothing really comes of them. It's apart from really the ending. The majority of the story, they're a non-existent entity. Most of the pirate crew are essentially background characters with not really much to say or do. The only exception really is Henry Avery, the main captain of the crew, and he's played by Hugh Bonneville, and he does a fantastic job here. He's a fantastic actor who really shows off his great chops here, taking this pirate role in a sci-fi program extremely seriously, almost as if he's trying to win a BAFTA in a sense. He takes this role extraordinarily seriously, which I feel really helps the flow of the narrative. However, what fails for him is really the script, which doesn't give him really much interesting to say or do. He does have a character, he does have a storyline here, which really only gets introduced halfway through the episode when we learn that his son has stowed away on the ship, and he, being sick, what's he got? What's it called? It's like a flu, but like worse. I can't remember. But his son is unwell, and despite not suffering any bruises or cuts, is seemingly cursed with the black spot. And so that does then beg the question, how is he able to stay hidden for this long if he goes under this drunk influence whenever the singing starts? But I guess it's not really important for the time. We basically learn that Captain Henry was actually a captain of his own ship. He was a part of the Royal Navy, and he worked in the British Arms, and somehow, for some reason, he gave up his wife and gave up his son and his chance of a normal life to become a pirate, with his son essentially believing that he is a pirate, believing that not believing he's a pirate, doesn't know anything about his life, even being on this ship for so long, hiding with the crew. So the Doctor tells the rest of the crew to hide out in this room, in the gunpowder room, and essentially tells Captain Henry to come with him and help get his TARDIS to the gunpowder room, so that they can all escape and get away from here safe from the Sirens' interference. So we get a pretty intense scene in which they're trying to walk through the ship, being a very closeted area. There's a lot of opportunities for the characters to trip. There's one moment where Avery almost trips and nearly pokes his hand on a nail, which could have bruised him and could have given him the black spot. They go to the TARDIS, which Captain Avery is absolutely astonished by. However, finds that the controls of the TARDIS are actually quite simple. He kind of understands them, being a captain himself. Which I don't know how to feel about that, because that's like saying, pirates could now learn how to drive a car, because it's essentially the same thing. No, it doesn't work like that, Avery. But something starts happening with the TARDIS. Something starts to malfunction, and the TARDIS actually disappears on its own without the Doctor and Avery. They've been towed, as the Doctor puts it. And then suddenly, there's been this criticism with this story, which I fully agree with, and that is, at this point in the story, you got Captain Avery's men, and they are in the gunpowder room with Amy, Rory, and the boy, with Avery's son. And two of them decide, we're going to escape. We're going to leave. The captain's gone soft. We're going to take a small boat and drift off to sea, leaving you all to die. However, the boy cuts one of them, putting a black spot on him, and only one of them actually leaves to try to escape, with the other one staying behind, bulking the door, seemingly having no plans to escape, and seemingly none of our characters in any sort of danger at this point. The next time we cut to this scene is after the realization that the Doctor, because the Doctor and Avery see that character who left the room, and he basically locks himself in the gunpowder room where with the jewellery, and he burns his hand, and he gets cursed with the black spot and is taken away by the siren. However, as Avery points out, there's no water in the room. It's believed at this point in the story that this character can actually travel through the water, which is how it can get into always boats are cursed. The curse is from the siren, who uses water as a way of transporting itself. But in this room there was no water, and yet it still got a crew member. And then the Doctor realizes it's not actually water, it's actually reflections. When it was coming out of the water, it was still water. When the reflection just wasn't there, the water was reflecting like a mirror. And whilst this is going on, Avery's son, which when it cuts to Avery's son, he starts cleaning his medallion with a shiny object, so that he can see himself, which would release the siren. So our characters, realizing that they could be in danger, runs to Amy, Rory, and the boy. Only that when the scene cuts to that scene, that other character, the one who barricaded the door, is just completely gone. He's not there. He just disappears throughout the story and doesn't appear until the very end of the adventure. What happened to him? Did he get taken by the siren? Is he just in the corner? What happened to him? Where did he go? But the Doctor gets there in time, and you get this really funny moment where Matt Smith is out of breath and he starts breathing on the medallion like that. And he basically tells Captain Avery to chuck all the jewellery, all of the everything out of the boat, chuck it into the ocean. Any shiny objects have to be destroyed or discarded. But Avery cannot do it, as he keeps a crown that he got from his pirate days, which kind of bites him in the ass, as later on we see that there's this storm, which means our characters can move out, and he drops the crown, revealing itself in the nightlight, showing the siren returning, and it actually then takes his son, and the Doctor realizes why he turned pirate. It's that glory that he just couldn't give up the treasure. He just could not give up the riches he had gotten on his travels, and that's what turned him pirate. He basically became greedy. This is used as a plot twist, and in a way it is nicely set up as the plot twist to underline why he would keep that there and the dangers it would set up for his son. However, in terms of Avery as a character, the fact that this element was introduced so late on, and it's not really that poignant into the plot, makes it feel really forced and hammered in. So Avery has this addiction. His greed essentially keeps the gold with him, to the point where he would even endanger the life of himself, his son, and his crew and his friends. But the majority of the story, nothing like that ever plays a key into the story, and it's only really that scene where that kind of plot line really ends, as nothing ever is established or plays around with that theme of Avery's greed being his downfall in the story, as Avery's distracted by the fact his son is taken by the siren. I forgot to mention, the siren is played by famed model Lily Coyle, who she has this really awesome presence about her, even though she actually does really nothing. She just comes in, starts singing and offering her hand out. And doesn't have any really speaking roles. She just, as a model, she really knows how to appear herself visually for the camera. And personally, I just think she's a really cool, just a looking individual with her strange but beautiful features on her face, giving this siren character a very unworldly but seemingly beautiful presence, which really is, the point of the story. Rory gets knocked off the ship and falls into the river, and despite him only being there for like a second at the most, the Doctor and Amy are essentially like, oh no, he's drowned. If you go in there, you'll drown as well. And then the Doctor decides there's only one way they could save Rory. And what he does is he lets out the siren using some clear water in a barrel on the ship to take Rory. And Amy is like, what? And the Doctor basically decides that maybe it doesn't kill them. Maybe she can be reasoned with. And it's like, right, we've got to do this. And he stabs himself, Amy and Avery, so they all get the black spot, and the siren takes them as well. And it just so happens that they don't actually die, they get teleported. What was the Doctor's logic in that? Where did he come up with this stupid idea? From all his point of view, she could have just killed him. And killed them all. And, yeah. There's no real any logical basis on it. And not any like sort of build up to it. The story in this regard can be compared to Amy's Choice, which does a very similar thing in which our characters decide to die in the vain hopes that they will see each other again. With Amy's Choice, however, that is established a bit better. Death there is a 50-50 chance, and Amy at that point is so depressed that even if it turns out that that's the reality, death would just mean that she'd be reunited with Rory, and it's a big sacrifice. As well in that story, the Doctor gives the choice to Amy, and it's Amy in the emotional state that makes the decision. Here, the Doctor, trying to be, I guess, sort of logical in a way, takes the option out of Amy and Avery's hand as he just stabs them in and basically gives into this plan. And it's only by sheer coincidence that they do not die. So what is actually happening? It turns out that there is a ship, sort of in an astral projection form, an alien ship, around Avery's ship. Two ships located within the same place. Two cars parked in the same car park. And it turns out the aliens of this ship had been suffering from a disease, a human disease, which had killed them all. And it turns out in the medical bay, all of our characters have been preserved there, left there to basically kept healed by the siren, who seemingly is very new to human biology, so doesn't know how to really cure anyone, and is just basically leaving them in suspended animation for the moment. And so the Doctor basically discovers all this. They find Rory seemingly fine, however, if he's taken out, he will drown. And Amy and Rory and the Doctor decide, right, Amy could save him by resuscitating him, and Rory has full faith that Amy would save him, whilst Captain Avery sees his son, who is extremely ill and taken by the black spot that way, and there's no real cure for him, decides that he's going to take this alien ship and go around the universe with this ship, stopping the Siren from taking any more human lives. And so him and his crew basically are revived, with his son staying on the ship as they go around through space. When they discover that the Siren is actually a doctor, there's this really funny moment where Amy's trying to touch Rory, but the Siren gets kind of mad every time. I don't know, I just really find it really funny. Like, she touches it with this, I don't know, I just found it really funny. And so, the climax of this story, the big, dramatic event, is that they take Rory out of his suspended animation, take him to the TARDIS as Amy has to resuscitate him. And it's seemingly that Rory dies at this point, and we have this tragic sort of death scene. Now, this would be a really dramatic, a really interesting scene. However, when it comes to Rory, he, despite him only being in a handful of stories, he has died in a majority of them. This is just another death, and it's something which, where a character just constantly dies, really hurts. The impact of when he dies again, I mean, the fact you have to say die again is a bit unprogressive in terms of dramatic tension. But Rory does get resuscitated in the end. It just appears that he dies for a moment. I love how Amy is just like, why can't the doctor do it and stuff. Rory has full faith, and the doctor doesn't want to disappoint Rory, so he actually kind of pushes Amy, despite him probably being able to do it himself, makes Amy do it. And when Rory comes back, the doctor, the first thing he does is get up and steps away, leaving their characters to have this bond with each other. Because in series 5, one of the big issues, one of the big dramatic dilemmas, is that the doctor kind of butts into their relationship. But here, the doctor can kind of see that there's a chance he could do that, and so he puts himself out of the picture. He steps behind, and you just see the doctor smiling to himself as the two characters hug and embrace themselves as they love each other and appreciate each other. And that's really the end of the story. However, there are some narrative threads. Earlier on in the episode, Amy sees the appearance of this woman, which she previously seen in Day of the Moon, coming from this little archway, which closes after a few seconds. When it happened the first time, it must have been really weird. She must have mentioned it to the doctor. Here, why didn't she mention it again? Why didn't she say, Doctor, this is the person I've seen her now. I've seen her in when we were in 1969, and I've seen her now on the spaceship. Clearly this is something, clearly we should go and investigate this and find out what we can with it. But no, she doesn't even mention it, which is really odd and strange. But of course, that is to tie into the story arc, and you don't want to tell that story yet. So that's kind of frustrating, and that's kind of distracting. It's not too distracting. It's not like Flesh and Stone, where the Kraken time takes over the story. It appears and then it just disappears, and the story is just like, right, we've established this, now forget about it and hope that you go back to your little adventure. But at the end of the story, something as well which also happened at the end of Day of the Moon, which I can't remember if I actually talked about. I think I forgot about it. The doctor's looking in his scanner, and the TARDIS is struggling to read if Amy is pregnant or not, coming up as a constant shift of positive and negative. Seemingly, Amy's seemingly fake pregnancy, false pregnancy in the previous two-parter seems to have much more to tie in with the storyline, which will resolve in the story A Good Man Goes to War. And so that is Curse of the Black Spot. Overall, I think it's an okay story. I feel like what Steve Thompson's weakest element is his characters. In this story, he's not very great at writing for any of the characters, making them feel really not boring, but just basically stripping the characters of any real interest and leaving them to the bare minimum of the characters that they have. But there are some fun moments, there are some fun little lines here and there. Jeremy Webb's directing of the ship is absolutely gorgeous. You wouldn't even believe that is not even actually a real ship. It was actually I believe it was like a fancy restaurant or something. And they basically CGI'd so that the island on one side of it is gone, so you just have the ship, with some really great visual shots of the ship. And I feel like the start of the story, where you get the interest of the siren and the mystery around her and the ship, and the fact that like even a single injury, it marks you for death. I found that concept really interesting and really engaging. However, it kind of falls flat on the second half. As soon as the story takes place in the astral projection ship, the story kind of really falls flat on its head. Actually, kind of just before that, when Rory drowns, the story kind of falls flat halfway through, and I can kind of understand why a lot of people consider this one of the weakest stories of the revived era. There are clearly episodes that are worse than this. However, I can understand why some people will put it in their least favourite stories of the revived era. But personally for me, it was okay. I enjoyed it, I had fun with it. But it's not a story I would remember too much going down the line. Which is kind of a shame, because it's a shame that like the first pirate story that we've had in actual decades is kind of a forgettable little adventure, and that's a disappointment. So there you go, that's Curse of the Black Spot as well as its prequel. So join me next time where Sarah Jane, Clive, Rani, Sky and Link, who reunites with them, are investigating this computer company, which seems like their CEO isn't actually a real person but a visual hologram, as a creature starts lurking in the shadows and kidnapping people. So join me next time for The Man Who Never Was, as we go and watch the last ever story of the Sarah Jane adventures. So I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!